Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing the other books from the wrap up that I did when I was doing my makeup and everything. I said I had some more books that I needed to wrap up. And instead of doing my makeup, I am not going to do that today. I'm just going to do it like regular because I didn't really feel like setting up all of my makeup and everything. But I will do that again in the future. I'll just kind of switch up between doing it that way and doing it this way. But I just kind of wanted to do it the chill way today. So that's what I'm going to be doing. So the first book I picked up was Olympus #4, and I just love this graphic novel series. It's so good. If you just like really good romance and Greek mythology, the Hades and Persephone thing, then you have to read these. They're super easy to read. And I just bought the volume 5 just a couple days ago, so I'm going to be reading volume 5 here pretty soon, but this is so good, and I'm kind of wondering like when this is going to end. Is she just going to keep coming out with more and more and more? Because like, I kind of want this to end, you know what I mean? Like I want it to have like an ending, and sometimes I feel like people that have like really successful things like this, they just like never want it to end because it's like their moneymaker, but I'm like, I kind of want to see them like finally come together and like have an ending, you know what I mean? So hopefully soon I can see that, but really good, highly recommend. I gave this 5 stars. So the next book I want to talk about was a book that was on my top 10 books I want to read in 2020, or 2023, not 2020. And I was really excited about this one for a really long time. This is a book that I've been wanting to read forever, and I finally got to it last month, and it was My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. Now this one was kind of a disappointment for me. Like I wasn't really sure how I was going to like Grady Hendrix, to be honest, because I'd never read Grady Hendrix before. And there were things about this book that I liked, and then there was things about this book that I didn't like. Now, obviously the cover is to die for, and I loved that this book took place kind of in the 80s. It was very nostalgic. It was just like a really fun vibe, if you know what I mean, and I loved that it was a group of girls. I feel like he did a really good job at describing what a girl's life would be like, you know, in the 80s, and like what a girl group is actually like. And Grady Hendrix is a boy, I'm pretty sure, right? Yes, he is a guy. But I feel like he really did a good job at describing what a girl group would look like, and I love that about it because it was just very nostalgic for me. And I feel like what this book did well was it was very self-aware. It was kind of campy in a way, like it kind of reminded me of Scream, how it has a little tiny bit of like a campy vibe to it, but it's still serious, but like not at the same time. It's like self-aware enough, and that's kind of how I feel like this book was. Like I can understand why they decided to make this into a movie, because it just is so, it has very movie vibes. Like you can just picture what this would be like as a movie, and I'm wondering if the movie is kind of campy like Scream is, because I feel like it's supposed to be that way. But the one thing I didn't like about this book is it was very slow going. Like the end was really interesting, and like the whole exorcism and things like that was really interesting, but most of the book I feel like was pretty slow, and I was just kind of like not sure where this book was going. Like lots of really small things were happening all throughout the story, but they weren't scary. They were just like really small, weird things that were just kind of like, huh, that's kind of weird. And then by the end, that's kind of when like the horror kind of stuff started happening, and it kind of got a little bit more interesting. It just took so long to get there, and I just didn't find the little tiny things that were happening throughout the story at all compelling, at all interesting, or at all scary, and I was just kind of bored, I feel like, through a lot of the story, which I didn't really like very much. So I wish that I liked this more than I did, because the cover is just so pretty and I just wanted to like this so much, but sadly it just didn't do a lot for me. I still gave it a 3 stars, like it was still enjoyable, but it definitely wasn't like my favorite thing ever, and it does make me wonder if I'm going to read Grady Hendrix in the future. I don't know. If you guys know another Grady Hendrix book that was really good, like what's your favorite Grady Hendrix, let me know and maybe I'll give that one a try. So the next book that I want to talk about is a book from my TBR as well, and this was Ruby Spencer's Whiskey Year. And as you guys know, I bought this because I loved the cover, and it was for a cozy book. That was the prompt, and I thought this cover looked very cozy. And this is one of those weird books that like grew on you the more that you read it, if that makes sense. But then there was a lot of stuff about this book that I didn't like as well. This was very similar to My Best Friend's Exorcism. Like there were great things about it, but then also things where I was just kind of like, not my favorite, you know what I mean? But the thing about this book is it really does grow on you. The characters grow on you, the setting really grows on you. You start to become like really attached to being in this world with these characters. It's similar to The Simple Wild, because this takes place in Scotland. And I feel like books that take place in Scotland and places like that are always just so vivid in your mind, because they just have like this certain quality to them that makes them so like immersive, is that the right word? Where you just can picture everything so well and it's just so specific to just like Scotland. And that's how I feel about this book. And I think that that's why there's a little bit of a soft spot for me here, because like when I think about this book, I can really just like immerse myself right back into all the things that I pictured in my mind. The thing that bothered me about this book was the characters and the relationships. So like, you know how there's those books that just don't have realistic relationship growth and you just feel like it's a little bit cringe in like how it progresses? Like, this book was a little bit insta-lovey, sort of. And there were times where I was like, wait, what? Like, why are they holding hands? Like, that doesn't feel like the right time yet. Or like, why is he touching her right there? Like, it just doesn't feel like the right time yet. Like, I kind of felt like it was like they were suddenly like dating, but it was like random and it was never talked about. And it just felt weird. Like, the progression of the relationship just did not feel exciting to me. It felt more awkward to me, which I did not like at all. And I feel like all of the relationships were like that. Like, they were very fast to develop. Like, she made this friend in Scotland in like 2 meetings. Like, she met her one time and they talked for like a little bit, and she met her one other time and they talked for like a little bit, and suddenly she was like her best friend and she like couldn't betray her best friend. And I'm like, you literally talked to her like twice. Like, she's not your best friend. And so it was a little bit weird. Like, she was trying to make us believe that these relationships were like these big things when they just didn't feel like they should be yet. And I feel like when you're writing a romance, believability is extremely important, and it might have been because this was a little bit insta-lovey. And also the conflict was a little bit weird as well. Like, you know, when it felt a little bit like Disney Channel original movie. Like, you know how conflicts are just kind of like dorky and really, really, really stereotypical? Like, the villain was very stereotypical and the whole just like conflict was really stereotypical to where it almost feels a little cheesy. That's kind of what this felt like. Like, I was kind of rolling my eyes sometimes, like, come on. And if you're kind of wondering what the plot is, it's basically this girl that moves to Scotland and this little cozy restaurant that's their like pub or whatever is gonna go out of business because they're not doing well, and it's like kind of them trying to save this pub. That's basically kind of the storyline. So she kind of gets like wrapped up in saving this small business in this cute little Scottish town. So I gave this 3 stars. It wasn't the best, but it definitely wasn't the worst either. Okay, so the next book is one that I'm very disappointed in, and I was so sad that I felt this way about this book because I love this movie. It is one of my favorite movies. As a child, I loved this movie, and it's always going to be one of my favorite movies because I think they did a really, really good job with the movie. But it was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And sadly, I gave this 3 stars. Now, it's not that I don't see the qualities of this that make it good or why Disney chose to create this as a movie. Like, I get it. But the book, there's a lot of things wrong with this book that I didn't like. One, there's no plot or conflict. So like, in the movie, Alice is really wanting to go home and she's trying to figure out how to get home. And like, that's the whole point of the story in the movie, is her trying to get home, her trying to ask people how to get home. But that's not part of this book at all. In this book, it's just basically her wandering around. She's never wanting to get home. She's never really wanting to do anything, particularly like, there's no goal. And I think that that's what this book really, really missed, because the entire time I'm like, what is the point of this? Like, what am I reading? And then on top of that, it's extremely, extremely nonsensical, which we all know that Alice in Wonderland is nonsensical. But still, the movie was able to do it in a way where there was still a goal that you're trying to achieve. So all the nonsense was kind of fun to see along with the plot line. But this, it was just nonsense the entire time. And at first it was kind of fun to read, but by the end, it's extremely tiring to read. It really tires you out because you start to just feel like nothing is making any sense, and it's just kind of like random things that he thought of. It kind of feels like a dream. Like, you know, when somebody is telling you one of their dreams and they go on forever and it's so convoluted, and like one person shows up here and then they're all of a sudden in Walmart and then they're all of a sudden at the park, but then blah 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 isn't there anymore. It's now this person, but then like Jennifer Lopez was there and like she was singing to me, and it's just so convoluted and you're just like, okay, like I don't care, it's a dream. That's what this felt like. But for like how many pages? Like 100 pages. So by the end I was just kind of like, okay. But with that said, I still love the movie. The movie really did give this something that the book was missing. I gave this 3 stars, and I think it was kind of a lower 3 if I'm being honest, which I hate to say that. Do you ever feel so guilty giving a star rating for something that you've wanted to like so bad? That's how I feel about this. So it's one of those things where I'm like, do people actually like this book, or are they just saying that they like it because they like the movie so much? Do you know what I mean? Like, is there a conspiracy? So that's my thoughts on Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Not my fave. Okay, so then I read Einstein's Dreams. I read this actually on audio, but I do have the physical copy, and the person who wrote this wrote Some 40 Tales from the Afterlives, which was one of my favorite books of all time. I love that book. And this is written by the same author. And so I was hoping that this would be kind of similar, and it is very, very similar. So Some is a book about afterlives. And so he basically describes like a whole bunch of different afterlives and what life would look like if the afterlife looked different, you know, in different ways. And it was really, really interesting because it really had you contemplating life in a lot of different ways and like what it means and stuff like that, which I really liked. And this kind of tackles time in the same way that Some tackled the afterlives. So he basically describes different worlds where time works differently. So in some worlds, time just like repeats itself over and over again, or time moves backwards, or just a whole bunch of different things. Like time just works differently. And kind of what that means for life, sort of. Like if time moved like this, what does that mean for life? So it's very philosophical, it's very thought-provoking, but I just didn't feel like it hit the same as Some did for whatever reason. I don't know why. I feel like Some just had a little bit more of a clear, like easy like format or something. This was a little bit harder to just digest. I don't know how to explain it any other way. It just didn't hit the same, and I wanted it to hit the same. It doesn't mean that I didn't like this book. I did give it 3 stars, but I wouldn't say that it is definitely like one of my new favorite books of all time or anything like that, but it did have some stories that I liked. Like, do you ever feel like the format in which you read something affected how much you liked a book? I feel like this book is one of those books that I should have read physically, and I read it audio. And because I read it in the audio format, I just didn't like it quite as much. Like, it got really convoluted listening to it, but if I would have read it physically, I think maybe I could have like sat and chewed on the ideas a little bit more, and I would have enjoyed it more in that way. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe that was the reason that I didn't like it as much, but I don't know. But if you liked Some, I would definitely say give this a try because he definitely uses the same format. He just kind of switches up the ideas a little bit. So interesting, thought-provoking, and great if you love philosophy. Okay, so the next book I read was A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber. You guys, I love this series. I love this series so much. There's just something about this series that just was so perfect for me, and I just want more stuff like this. This is actually putting me in a YA fantasy mood, and I have a theory. Okay, listen to my theory because I think I'm right. So the thing that I'm really liking about this series in particular, and why I think I'm in this YA fantasy or romantasy mood, is because they're not allowed to write spice and steam and smut and all that kind of thing. And you guys know I'm totally fine with smut. I think it's fine. But the thing that I find with new adult authors is they're trying to use the smut to sell the romance. So they think that they don't have to like write a really good romance. If they just put enough smut in it, then it's just gonna make the romance really good. But that's not how it works. Smut is not good if the romance sucks. And the thing about YA authors, and this, you know, series in particular, is the authors have to sell the romance using romance. So you really, really believe this relationship, and you don't need the smut to believe it. And I feel like that is why I have been really liking, you know, young adult romance novels. I just kind of think about the characters older. Like I'm 38. I'm not thinking about teenagers, you know what I mean? But that's why I've been really liking YA fantasy, is because the writers aren't lazy. They're not trying to use smut to sell this romance. And I feel like smut is only good if smut is not needed. You know what I mean? Like, develop the romance, make the romance really, really good, and if your romance is good, then you can throw smut in there. You know what I mean? And that is where new adult authors get on my nerves. Like, I don't want to read smut with no context for no reason. Like, it's boring. I just like skim it a lot of times, especially if there's too much of it. And I'm like, I don't believe this couple actually likes each other. I just think they're really sexually attracted to each other. Like, that was another issue that I had with Secretly Yours by Tessa Bailey, and why I hated that book and gave it 2 stars. Because there was literally no romance. All they did was talk about how much they wanted to rip each other's clothes off, and it got creepy. Like, they were just constantly obsessed with how sexually attracted they were to each other and how often they wanted to like do stuff. And I'm just like, that's not really giving me romance vibes. That's just giving me obsessed with each other, like I want to like have a one night stand vibes, you know what I mean? And that's not the same thing. So this novel is great if you like actual romance, you know what I mean? And it's unique and it's special and it's wonderful. It reminds me of that Lady Gaga audio on TikTok, but it's so good. It's so good, you guys. If you're wanting something unique, and the thing about this series is it's unique. Like, I am so tired of reading the same freaking fantasies over and over and over again. This is different. When you read this, it's going to be different from anything that you've ever read. And I'm not going to talk too much more about it because I already talked about it in my last wrap up, because I talked about The Ballad of Never After and everything, which is the best book in the series in my opinion, the middle book. But this is still really good. The only thing is there's a trope in this one that I just don't really like that much, and luckily she did a pretty good job with it. It wasn't like the worst thing ever. It's just a trope that I'm not a huge fan of. And the other thing that I didn't like is the ending kind of felt a little rushed. I kind of felt like the ending felt a little juvenile. I'll just say there was a fist fight in a really awkward time, and I'm just like, can we not? Like, this could be a really great scene. Like, I could just skip this fist fight. It felt very immature, and I felt like the end felt very rushed, which was kind of sucky because it's like you wait for that whole entire series for like this big epic ending, and I just kind of wish the ending was a little bit more epic. So that was the only downside to this one, but it was still really good. Like, don't let that like take away from actually reading the series, because the series is really great. It's just me being nitpicky, if that makes sense. So I gave this 4 stars. So the next book I read was Rupi Kaur's Milk and Honey, which, you know, I'm not a huge fan. I want to be a fan of poetry so badly. Like, it's one of those things where I don't hate modern poetry. Like, I get why people like it, you know? But sometimes I feel frustrated with it, and I've ranted about modern poetry a million times, and I don't want to rant about it again, but like, it's one of those things where it's that poetry where you don't have to think too much while you're reading it, which can be really great, because sometimes you're just in the mood for something that's not too much, right? Because sometimes if poetry gets to be too allegorical, I'm just like, okay, no, I don't want to read it. So I can understand it, but at the same time, sometimes I feel like it can feel lazy, and that's kind of how I feel with most modern poetry collections. But I can say that there were some poems in it that I really liked, and then there were some poems that I was just so on. And I feel like that's often the case with poetry collections. Like, you're not gonna like every single poem, but there just wasn't a ton of poems that I liked. But I did give it 3 stars. It wasn't a 2 stars. Like, I've given some poetry collections 2 stars, 1 star, but this one was 3 because there was definitely more poems in this one than other poetry collections that I've read. So that is my review of that one. And then, you guys, so then we got a 1 star, guys. A 1 star. Now, I do not give 1 stars very often. So the difference between 1 star and 2 star for me, which I usually give 2 stars, that's usually my lowest rating that I'll give. It's when I personally don't like a book. Like, I get really bored with a book. I just do not like a book, but I can understand how other people could like it. Like, it has a plot, it has, you know, like, I can understand how people could like it. That's usually when I give 2 stars. But when I give a 1 star, I think I've only given like 5 1-star ratings in my entire life. It's when I question how something got published, or I question how somebody could like it, if that makes sense. Like, I just don't understand how somebody could be like, ooh, I love this. You know what I mean? That's when I give a 1 star, and this is one of those books that really had that vibe to me where I'm like, what is this and how did it get published? And I don't want to be too mean. Like, I really don't want to be too mean, but I get frustrated when I give 1 stars because it just makes me mad that this book somehow got published and I was scammed out of my money. And it is 19 Claws and a Blackbird by Augustina Bazterrica, and she wrote Tender as the Flesh. And I still kind of want to read that though. I'm curious about that one for some reason. But this one, so this is a short story collection, and this feels like she wanted to make some extra money. So she opened up her journal and she took out all of these random stories that she wrote in like 5 seconds, or even writing exercises, right? Where you're not planning on anybody reading them, but you're just kind of writing them to just like warm up or whatever. And she took those stories and put them in this book and said, pay me money. And they just were bad. I have no idea what is going on, why these are supposed to be good. They were so bland. Like, every time I tried with this, guys. I read every story, and I was reading like 1 story a night, like thinking, okay, I'm gonna get to a good one. Like, there's gonna be a good one in here. And every single one, I am like, what am I reading? This makes no sense. I have no idea what's going on. This is so painfully boring. And I tried, and I just don't like books that make me feel like I got scammed or that the author threw something together really fast to try to make money. That's kind of what I felt like this was. It was like a money grab, like I'm just gonna throw all my stories together and like try to sell it. That's what this felt like. And I don't want to be mean because I really do want to try Tenders the Flesh because I've heard really good things about it. I've heard it's really freaking creepy. But this just was not. I just don't get it. And I'm angry. So the next book that I want to talk about is a book that I actually really liked, and this was also on my TBR for last month, and it was Be Not Far From Me by Mindy McGinnis. And I enjoyed this one. Now, you guys know that I like survival stories in general anyways, so this was really fun for me because I just like that in stories. And this was about a girl who is out partying with her friends, and she sees her boyfriend cheating on her, and they're out in like the forest, like out in the boonies, and she sees her boyfriend cheating on her and she freaks out. She's really, really drunk, and so she runs because she's just really upset. So she runs out into the forest, she trips over a rock and hurts her foot really, really bad. Like, it's a very bad injury. But she runs so far that she ends up getting lost, and she can't find her way back to the campsite. And so she ends up getting lost in this forest, and she has to survive basically with a very, very injured foot. And this book was just really good. It's really fast paced. It's very short, so it just reads very, very quickly, and it's YA as well. So if you want something that's short, fast, and interesting, I would definitely recommend this. I thought it was super, super good. And here's the thing, you guys. I never, ever get uncomfortable when I read. Like, it's rare to really ignite heavy, heavy emotions in me. I rarely get scared. I never cry, really. I just don't get triggered with high emotion very often. I'm a pretty flat person. This book, there was one scene in this book that triggered me so much. Now, I have a really, really, really huge fear of ticks, you know, like the bug ticks. Can't do it, can't do it. It's the one thing that will literally send me into an OCD spiral, and I will have intrusive thoughts for like 4 days, and I cannot get the thoughts out of my head. There was a scene in this book that did that to me. Like, I was thinking about it for like, I would say 4 days after I read it, and the thoughts just kept coming into my head and I couldn't get them out of my head. It was like the worst thing ever. I'm not gonna read it to you, but I read it to my cousin and I read it to my husband, and they were both like, ooh, and they know how I feel about ticks too, so they were like literally laughing at me because they thought it was really funny that I was just so tortured by the scene. But yeah, that scene probably did more to me than any other horror novel that I've ever read. Like, this is body horror to the max. Like, there's definitely body horror in this for sure. So I gave this book 4 stars. I highly recommend it if you want something just really, really fun, and, well, I wouldn't say it's fun, but it's good. The only thing I don't like about Mindy McGinnis is she really tries to write the not like other girls type of main character that has like major attitude problems. And I remember the other book I read by Mindy McGinnis, I felt the same way about the main character. Like, they have like this major attitude problem, and they're like not like other girls. Like, she's such an outdoorsy girl, and she's just like doesn't like to wear makeup, because why would you wear makeup? Like, I hate that, and I hate main characters with attitude problems. Like, it annoys me when characters are just rude, but it's supposed to be like this strong, like, I'm such a strong girl, and it's like, no, you're not a strong girl, you're just rude. Like, nobody likes rude people. And that's kind of how her main characters always come across to me, and I hate it. It really annoys me, and that's kind of how I felt with her. The only thing that worked with this one is she did have a really good arc. So by the end, she kind of fixed her attitude problem. I read this book in probably like 2.5 days, which is fast for me because I don't have a ton of time to read, and I don't ever read books in like 2 days. It's just very uncommon for me. I read this really fast. I read it in like 2 days. You get through it in no time. So if you're looking for a fast read at the end of the year to meet your Goodreads goal, this is a great one, and it was really good. So highly recommend. I gave it 4 stars. So that is it, you guys, for my wrap up. And I had a lot of books that I wanted to talk about, so I really wanted to get this up before, you know, I got too many. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if you have read any of these books and if you liked them, or if you didn't like them, if you had a different opinion to me, or if you had the same opinion. I'm just very, very curious. And also comment down below what book you're reading right now and if you recommend it. And I think that's it, guys. So I will see you in my next video, and I will talk to you soon.